Greetings, lovers of Lovecraft. I have returned once again, bearing gifts of extremely obscure Lovecraft adaptations. So this is part 2 of my history of Lovecraft adaptations. Part 1 was a video I uploaded last week about what was the first H.P. Lovecraft movie adaptation. This week we're doing everything except movies. So we'll be talking about TV shows, we'll be talking about short films, one in particular, comic books, video games, and audio recordings. So officially the question we'll be asking is, what is the first ever Lovecraft adaptations across all mediums, but really it's just a pretext, just an occasion, an excuse to explore the dark catacombs of Lovecraft adaptations. What is my methodology? We're talking about media that hasn't played in a movie theater and that is less than 40 minutes, which will be our criteria for feature length. Also, so that's condition 1. Also, only stuff from before 1980. So we'll be stopping at December 1979. Why? Because the 80s is when the Stuart Gordon, Brian Usna movies start to appear, which are obviously super cool. But they represent kind of a shift of Lovecraft adaptations in mass culture. So even though there are a few more obscure HPL adaptations that are quite cool that come out before the Stuart Gordon movies, that's our stop date. It's a convenient stop date. So anything before 1980, obviously, they have to be related to Lovecraft. So for a story essentially to qualify as Lovecraftian, they either have to be, one, directly based on a specific Lovecraft story. So if a TV show, for instance, was an adaptation of Call of Cthulhu, well, that's a direct adaptation. So that's category 1. Category 2 is Tales of the Cthulhu mythos or Legends of the Cthulhu mythos. So that's any TV show that specifically references the mythos and that essentially takes place in the Cthulhu universe, like the Yog-Sothoth universe. So that's number 2. Number 3 is generally Lovecraftian stories. So I don't have as much of these today, but examples would be like the Babylon 5 TV movie, the Babylon 5 version of the Cthulhu mythos, but it's not the Cthulhu mythos, it's Straczynski's own take. That would be an example of a generally Lovecraftian. Garth Marenghi's Dark Place, they have a very specific parody of Lovecraft. That would be an example. We also had a conversation in the comments, very fun conversation recently about Creature from the Black Lagoon. So that might, fall into the category of generally very vaguely Lovecraftian. So there's this whole conversation that's possible. But so that's number 3. And number 4 is, our fourth category is homage. Something that is not at all an adaptation or even a Lovecraftian story, but that still is a name check, for instance. Like Jess Franco's Necronomicon is a good example. The movie has nothing whatsoever to do with Lovecraft. He just put the name there because he thought it was cool. That's an example. If you have a spaceship called the Necronomicon, but the rest of the story has nothing to do with it, that's the general category of homage to Lovecraft. If the captain is called Lovecraft, but it's not at all a Lovecraft tale, that sort of thing. So I don't think that might be one. I think there's one in the list. But generally speaking, we'll be mainly talking about either direct adaptations or tales of the Cthulhu mythos. I have not included any works by other authors, like adaptations by either Robert E. Howard or Clark Ashton Smith. I do mention one, but generally speaking, there are other good authors that are somewhat Lovecraft adjacent, William Holt Hodgson, for instance, but those are topics for other videos for another day. For today, only Lovecraft, mainly direct adaptations or tales of the Cthulhu mythos, and in one of 5 categories, as mentioned, either TV shows, short films, comic books, video games, and audio recordings. Now, let us begin. Last time I went from like in reverse chronological order when I talked about the movie adaptations. This time I'll be going from the like in direct chronological order, like from the oldest to the most recent. And we begin with a movie I did mention last time in TV movies, because it was a TV movie, as I mentioned. It's 1965's Dark Intruder. Because I talked about it last time, I won't mention it again, except to say that it's a TV movie about Leslie Nielsen as an occult detective, and he mentions the Cthulhu mythos by name, and so it's very cool, very fun movie. Check out my other video if you want to know more. The only thing I will say about the movie for today is that I made an error. I mentioned that the main character, like not the main character, but Leslie Nielsen's friend, like the villain of the week, essentially, was played by the guy who played Gary Seven in the old Star Trek TV show. And somebody rightfully corrected me in the comments, because it's not the same actor at all. The actor who plays the villain in Dark Intruder is called Peter Mark Richman, but he did play in Star Trek. He played in The Next Generation, actually, in Season 1, Episode 25 of The Neutral Zone. He plays the old billionaire they find in a derelict spaceship, and they thaw him out, and he's generally unpleasant to the crew. So he's that guy. And I will also last mention on Dark Intruder, it was directed by Harvey Hart, who also directed Mud's Women, the Season 1 episode of Star Trek. So there you go. Now, our story today begins proper. What is the first, except for Dark Intruder, like, what is the first adaptation of a Lovecraft story? Well, our story begins with Dark Shadows, the horror, gothic, vampire, werewolf, time travel soap opera that started in, I think, 1966, something like that, 1966, and ended in 1971. And so that's 1,225 episodes plus 2 movie theater movies. The whole series lasts something like 450 hours. That's a lot of content. And one season of that soap opera features a storyline called the Leviathan storyline. And that, according to all the sources I could find, is an adaptation of the general Lovecraft universe, more specifically Dunwich horror, but probably other stuff. Now, if we don't count Dark Intruder, and Dark Intruder is, as I mentioned, it name checks the Cthulhu mythos. You might say, if you're being generous, that it's set in the same universe, though the cosmologies and theologies don't match, actually. But certainly in the case of Dark Shadows, you have something that is almost, according to the sources like Wikipedia and the Dark Shadows wiki, that are direct adaptations of Lovecraft's Dunwich horror and other stories. They change the names of the creatures and the monsters and plenty of other details, but the consensus seems to be that it was a deliberate, hidden attempt, like an overt attempt at adapting Lovecraft's Dunwich horror. Now, I haven't seen Dark Shadows, certainly not the Leviathan storyline. I had heard of Dark Shadows pretty much all my adult life, but I had never seen an episode. I started watching it last week. And I watched so far 2 episodes, so 1,223 to go plus 2 movies. I enjoy it. It's cheesy, melodramatic stuff. It's kind of like a soap opera version of American Horror Story, if you like, in the sense that they really throw every conceivable horror trope at the story's wall, if you like. They put everything in there, and at the same time, contrary to American Horror Story, in one sense nothing much happens because it's a soap opera, so they definitely stretch things out, but it's quite captivating, actually. It was shown at the time when kids would come back from school, so they were actually the people watching it, like teenagers, and it was a big hit with teenagers back from school. So anyway, I didn't watch it at the time. I watched a couple of episodes today, actually. I skipped along across the seasons, and I checked that year a few scenes and a few bits of episodes to double check if it is actually an adaptation of Dunwich Horror. And actually, because of the way the seasons and the stories are structured, because it's a soap opera and they stretch so much, it's you really have to watch the whole thing, I think, to determine for certain if it is an adaptation. But I think it's safe to say, because all sources say it is, so I have no reason to doubt it. So if you have watched the season, please tell me in the comments. It looks like it is. So if it is, if that is correct, even though they changed the names and all the details they needed to change to make it fit in their own universe with vampires and time travel, etc. Still, apparently, it is an adaptation of Lovecraft's Dunwich Horror, and the first TV adaptation. I will mention a few other TV shows and TV specials and TV movies. The first is 1971's Night Gallery, Rod Serling's Night Gallery. So this one, there's no question that it's the series features Lovecraft adaptations. There are 3 main episodes that are Lovecraft related. The first is Professor Peabody's Last Lecture, which I watched today for the first time. That was in season 2, episode 14, broadcast on November 10th, 1971. It's a 10-minute skit. The other 2 stories were later the same season. They had a version of Pickman's Model and a version of Cool Air. So I have now watched all 3. And from what I gather, what I've seen online, including in the comments for this channel, like usually people like those adaptations. They're regarded pretty fondly by the fan base usually. And so before, like, all these stories have a few things in common. First of all, see, Rod Serling's Night Gallery. Rod Serling is obviously best known for the Twilight Zone, which is legendary for a reason. I'm also presently slowly rewatching the entirety of the old Twilight Zone TV series. It's magnificent. Obviously, not all episodes are as good as the higher rated ones, but the Twilight Zone is magic. I don't need to tell you that. And Night Gallery was Rod Serling's attempt at recapturing that Twilight Zone magic, and he doesn't quite achieve it. It's still cool, that's the thing. But one thing they all have in common is essentially they're all not quite as good as the Twilight Zone. They all have cheesy monsters, also, like really, really cheesy, cheap Japanese movie, essentially levels of cheesy monsters, which is normal because it's a TV show in the 70s. They didn't have a huge budget, so yeah. But still, they're all pretty cool nonetheless. And last two things all these adaptations have in common: they don't aim for subtlety, and they don't aim for fidelity to the text. So what they do have is a lot of charm, and they're not subtle, but they're relatively smart, and they have a lot of heart, I would say, especially like the Pickman's model and Cool Air. Like, they take a lot of liberties with the story, and as a fan, I wish they wouldn't, but like, even when they really radically diverge from the source material and even from the spirit of the story, I have to say, still, I think they have their heart in the right place. And the fact is that it's just so much fun to see an old 1970s TV show based, however loosely, on a Lovecraft TV show, story. I mean, it has that kind of semi-nostalgic flavor. I mean, it has a specific feel that's very heartwarming and very fun for us cosmic horror fans. So yeah, and I will say that I was very pleasantly surprised by Professor Peabody's last lecture. So that 10-minute skit, it's played a little bit more as a comedy, but less than I thought based on a description. Essentially, the story is a teacher played by Carl Reiner, and he's really, really good in the role. And he's this very contemptuous like philosophy or history of religion teacher. He's a materialist teacher of the history of religion who likes making fun of superstition, and he's teaching a school of like a class of high school children who are named things like Mr. Lovecraft and Mr. Derleth and Mr. Block. There's other names of the characters, so there's that level of reference. But the story is actually set in the Cthulhu Mythos universe. The cult that Professor Peabody is explaining to us is the Cthulhu cult. He mentions Arkham, he mentions Miskatonic University. He even produces the copy, the expurgated copy of the Necronomicon that he had ordered from Miskatonic University library. So, and he starts reading from the Necronomicon. Quite a bad idea, I might add. So that's essentially your skit, and obviously what will happen when he reads from the Necronomicon. Well, you kind of see the end coming from a mile away. Even just the basic premise, basically how it's going to end, and some cheesy rubber monsters are involved, but all in all, I loved that. I thought it was really cool, really fun. Took the story more seriously than I thought it would, and as I mentioned, it's definitely set in the Cthulhu Mythos universe, no ifs, ands, or buts, and I like that. I thought it was really cool. Next, adaptation. I will mention quickly that they also did a Clark Ashton Smith adaptation, Return of the Sorcerer. This one I didn't see. Has Bill Bixby and Vincent Price in it, so that looks super cool. It was aired in 1972, so the season after that. If I ever do another episode of this series where I talk about other authors of the Cthulhu, like the Lovecraft Circle. I'll be sure to mention it, especially since Clark Ashton Smith is a fantastic author. Next story in our list of TV movies for today, we have The Horror at 37,000 Feet from 1973. So this is essentially snakes on a plane, except with druidic monsters. So druids on a plane. Stars Chuck Connors, Roy Fiennes from The Invaders, Paul Winfield, I think from Star Trek 2, and a little known actor named William Shatner, who has no luck with planes. Again, this is another one of those movies I haven't seen. I only checked a few scenes earlier today. Usually I always try to watch everything before making the videos, but today it just wasn't feasible. I will say that Horror at 37,000 feet looks like it's a lot of fun. From what I hear, the Lovecraft reference is very remote, very vague. Essentially, the druid something have called upon the Old Ones, so there are gods and they're called the Old Ones, and that's about it. There's like an evil entity, there's a ritual involved, so those elements. But so I don't know if there's much more Lovecraftiana to be found here, but I will say that from the little bits I saw earlier today, it actually looks like it's a lot of fun. So I'll almost certainly I'm going to watch the whole thing pretty soon, and I might even do a video about it. So for now, that's the next one on our list. This one was more like a generally vaguely Lovecraftian story. The next one is Geiger's Necronomicon from 1975. I think I saw that when I was a kid. Obviously, this one is just a falls into the Lovecraft homage category in that it's a documentary on Geiger. His art book, essentially, he published a very famous art book, is called the Necronomicon. That's the art book in which you will find the drawings that inspired, the monster from Alien, stuff like that. But obviously, there's nothing much more than the name that's Lovecraft here. So, but it's cool. I put it here because it's 1975. I'm being complete today with all the adaptations, so I put it in there. But yeah, something Lovecraftian is name checked, and it's not a feature-length movie, so I put it here. Geiger's Necronomicon, cool to know it's there. And our last two TV movie adaptations. The next one, this one too, I didn't watch the whole thing. I only watched little bits, but it's fantastic. It's a German TV movie adaptation of Shadow Out of Time. It's called Schatten aus der Zeit, again from 1975. It lasts 50 minutes, and you can find a copy online. There is a copy floating around somewhere, and it's told as a series of still photos with a voiceover narrative, which means it's told exactly like La Jetée, essentially like Chris Marker's very famous short La Jetée. So essentially it's the same form here, which I thought was really cool and a quite elegant way of making a Lovecraft TV movie in the 1970s with a probably minuscule budget. My German is very rudimentary, but I do know enough to understand the general idea of what people are saying. I can sort of understand like 30%, 40% of what people are saying, and I watched the bits of the movie earlier. So it's a voiceover, but he's not reading the actual story word for word. It's a rewriting, but a very, very close rewriting. So this looks like a very faithful adaptation of Lovecraft, one of the most famous, faithful Lovecraft adaptations out there. I would probably put it in the same category as the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society adaptation. So it's that level of respect for the text is what it looks like from what I've seen. And it looks, again, super cool. I mean, obviously there are no subtitles. So either generate them via AI or do as I do, learn German. And in 2 years, a year or two, I'll be able to watch the whole thing. Yeah, alas, that's what we need. But it's super, super, super cool. Definitely one of the coolest, most obscure titles on our list. And the next one is even more obscure, so much so that I could not find a copy of this. It's called, this is a Portuguese adaptation of Through the Gate of the Silver Key. And I will just read it phonetically because I have zero knowledge of Portuguese. It's called Nem Passarão Nem PXC from 1977. And all I know is that it's 43 minutes long. It's probably a TV movie, but even then I'm not so sure. And it involves Lovecraft's Through the Gate of the Silver Key. Or just the Silver Key, one of those stories. If you know of a copy, like on Mubi or something like that, of a DVD or a Blu-ray or whatever, let me know. I'm very curious to watch it. So yeah, my last TV movie on our list is this Portuguese ultra obscurity Nem Passarão Nem PXC adaptation of the Silver Key something 1977. Okay. 2 honorable mentions before we move out of TV shows and TV adaptations. They're both from Doctor Who, actually, because there are a couple of Doctor Who episodes, especially in the Tom Baker era, but also the John Pertwee era. Probably, like, if we were to go through the whole series of old Doctor Who from Hartnell all the way up to Sylvester McCoy, we'd probably find actually quite a few stories that are again Lovecraft adjacent, either intentionally or not. Certainly a couple I would consider as strong Lovecraft candidates for Doctor Who stories. One would be Seeds of Doom from 1976, and because there's an expedition in the Antarctic, and evil monsters come out of it and all that stuff. But certainly 1977's Image of the Fendal, which I have quite fond memories of. It has cult, it has a Cthulhuoid, tentaculoid creature. That one is it's probably as close to Lovecraft as you can get within classic Doctor Who territory. Anyway, once again, if eventually I do another video where I talk more, I might do one just for fun. I might do one like old Doctor Who episodes that are somewhat Lovecraftian. And if I ever do, you will definitely be hearing more about Seeds of Doom and Image of the Fendal. Now, I mentioned short films. So that's our second category. And there's only, to my knowledge, there is only one short film, that is to say, a movie that was less than 40 minutes long, that was filmed with the intention that it would be shown in movie theaters. And back in the day, it used to cost an arm and a leg to make movies like that, an 8mm or 16mm. So there's very few of them, and in the period before 1980, the only one I could find is The Whisper in Darkness from 1975. It lasts 32 minutes. It was directed by David C. Smith, from what I could find online. There is a DVD of this. You can buy it on eBay. Eventually, I'm sure I will. For now, I haven't seen it. But if only for the reason that it's the first ever fan film, really. It deserves our respect and our gratitude, because nowadays there's tons of them, but back in the day they were hard to find, and that was the first. The next one after that is 1980s music of Eric Zahn, but that's a topic for another day. Now, comic books are the next category. I could find about 20 to 25 H.P. Lovecraft adaptations in comic book form between around 1950 to 1979. I won't list all of them here today because it would just be too damn long. But today I will mention the first three or four. And I was very pleasantly surprised to discover that the Vault of Horror, like I think it's those old EC comics, I can confirm, I can see it here, they were the first, rightfully so, like the first comic books to publish Lovecraft adaptation. And were it not for one entry we will find later on our list, those would be the first ever Lovecraft adaptations. And issue number 16 of the Vault of Horror in this December 1950, January 1951. So I think that's how they dated. So December, January 1950, 1951. Issue number 16, they had an adaptation of In the Vault, a Lovecraft story actually I don't know that much about. It was 7 pages long, and that's our first Lovecraft adaptation comic book story. The next adaptation was in the next issue. Issue number 17, it was the story was printed as Baby, It's Cold Outside, but it was based on Cool Air, which is one of my favorite Lovecraft story. And the last adaptation of the 1950s, and the last comic book adaptation of the 1950s, was in Weird Terror. It was an adaptation of Pickman's Model, which they renamed Portrait of Death. Again, I didn't check. This might not be an EC Comics adaptation. It says here, Comic Media, Alan Hardy Associates, Weird Terror, Volume 1, Number 1. They published an adaptation of Pickman's Model. And after that, you have to wait 10 years for another comic book adaptation. It's none other than the Dell movie classic adaptation, Die Monster Die, which we've talked about, the movie. So they did a comic book. I have to find a copy of that. As I mentioned, I don't like the movie so much. I'm not the biggest fan of the movie, though it has plenty of cool stuff in it. But I would be really quite curious to read a comic book version of it with Boris Karloff, obviously. That should be pretty cool. And then 1968, Rats on the Wall in an issue of Creepy, and then you have a few Marvel Comics adaptations. So again, topic for another day. I could go through the whole list. Would be interesting, but I will be quick for now. Pickman's Model, Rats on the Wall, Shadow of the Time. There was a version of music of Eric Zahn in 1975, which I did read when I was a kid. It was reprinted in a French comic book, which is what I had when I was growing up. And if it's the same version, which is almost certainly is, it was really cool. The 1970s music of Eric Zahn from Marvel. There was a version of Cool Air drawn by Bernie Wrightson, like the master of horror comics. There was another story that was drawn by Gene Colan from Tomb of Dracula. So lots of great names involved. So and the last one I'll mention Again, I didn't do the whole list, but in 1979 there was a an Italian uh, bande dessinée, so like the European comic books, which are more, they're more for grown-ups a little bit. I mean, like the grown-up market is like they're more durable. They're meant to be more durable and a bit more serious, and you have a bigger category of adult oriented, not pornographic, but just adult oriented comics. And one of them is an adaptation of Dunwich horror, and actually quite a few more Lovecraft stories, which are drawn by a guy named Breccia. And I had that when I was growing up. So very strange drawings made by cutting up photographs, and it's just very, very strange stuff. And it was reprinted in the 1979 issue of Heavy Metal. And the same issue of Heavy Metal also had a version of A Statement of Randolph Carter. So most adaptations were of comic books of Lovecraft were American. The first were in EC Comics, and the last of the 70s, one of them at least was, they were both published in Heavy Metal in 79, and one of which was the Dunwich Horror by Breccia, which is a very strange creation, visually quite unsettling, and certainly a curiosity worth checking out. Okay, next we do video games. I didn't think about including this until late in the day, because I remembered I had seen this described online. And even though our cutoff date is 1979, you know, like anything before 1980, there is actually one legitimate video game based on Lovecraft, like a Lovecraft adaptation from 1979. It is called Kadath. Or Kadath, like I don't know where you put the accent. It's a text-based adventure, and let me just read you the description. Okay, so so here's something I found on the wiki for Lovecraft's Dreamland. So they do a good job presenting it. Kadath is a text adventure developed in 1979 by Gary Musgrave for the Altair, one of the earliest available home computers. The game was ported to the Commodore PET in 1981 and the Commodore 64 in 1983, where it was renamed as Eye of Kadath. And like if you go on IMDb, you'll be able to read the description of the story. It's 100% Lovecraft. You have the Necronomicon, you have the Elder Ones, you have the Eye of Kadath, which is an artifact, and with the whole storyline is full on Lovecraft. And it's obviously a text-based adventure game, so you've if you grew up in the 80s, you almost certainly played one of these. There was one for Stephen King's The Mist, which I played when I was very young, which I have very fond memories of. The Mist, which is somewhat Lovecraft adjacent, but again, a story for another day. The Mist came out after the 80s or during the 80s. Kadath is 1979, and if you've played those games, you know that they're they're not easy. You have to basically guess what are the words that the prompt will accept, will understand. So grab key, I'm sorry, I don't understand that. Okay, enter door, I'm sorry, I don't understand that. It's that sort of game. But still, I would be quite curious to play that one. Before I move on to the next one, I will read you the, just for fun again, I will read you a screen grab I found of the game. So, live, 1979's Kadath. Okay, here's the intro text. You, and only you, know of the secret that will prevent the rise of a power so dark and evil that to dwell on it too long will bring madness. To bring on it long, not even too long. To prevent this unimaginable a spawn of horror, you must 1. Enter the labyrinthian caverns, 2. Find the hidden and guarded Eye of Kadath, 3. Return the eye, yada yada yada, invoke elder powers. All these tasks must be accomplished before the Dark Star, terrible fireballs of doom, stuff like that. So obviously the level of writing is not quite at Lovecraft levels, but it looks super cool nonetheless. Okay, and this brings us to audio recordings. Okay, so the earliest audio recording, vinyl record recording of a Lovecraft story, there are quite a few. The earliest I could find is 1966. It's Roddy McDowall reads the horror stories of H.P. Lovecraft. He reads 2 stories. He reads The Outsider, which is one of the best Lovecraft stories he ever wrote, and The Hound, which is not amongst my favorites, but those other 2 they chose. And you can find that on YouTube. It's pretty easy to find a recording. It's lots of fun. He has loads of reverb on his voice, and he's kind of doing like a cod Shakespearean take on the text. It's good, cheesy fun. Roddy McDowall is a very agreeable person. Like, you can't not love him. Like, everybody, including me, loves Roddy McDowall. He's a nice guy. He's a cool guy. I will say that he's okay. I mean, it's not my favorite version, certainly compared to the trilogy of David McCallum recordings we have in the 1970s. There are 3 records of Lovecraft tales read by Mr. McCallum. The first is 1973's The Rats in the Wall. Next we have 1976's The Dunwich Horror. And lastly we have 1979's The Hunter of the Dark. All these recordings, all 3 recordings, are to be found on YouTube. There are no sound effects, there's no music, there's no reverb. It's just McCallum reading the text. I loved it. It works really well. His tone is great. He treats it seriously. Like, he puts less like false theatrical emphasis on the words. He's less trying to sound like a classical reading of a story, which is what McDowall is doing. Like, McDowall is reading a story as you would expect a 1960s story recording to sound like. It's just so it's aged is essentially what it is. So it's really fun, the McDowall version, but for our sensibilities, the McCallum version are just more they're more grounded, I will say. And it's funny because I watched a couple of David McCallum movies recently from the 70s, and I always liked him as an actor. I found him charismatic. He looked smart. He looked like somebody I would enjoy watching in a movie. But in the movies I watched, he wasn't that great. He was okay, essentially. One of them was Dogs, a TV movie about killer dogs, and the other was Hauser's Memory, which is a spy movie version of Donovan's Brain with evil Nazis and the like. And in both cases, they're fun watches. They're cheap TV movies. They're enjoyable for what they are. But in those movies, David McCallum feels like he's kind of sleepwalking through the part. He's, again, just okay. Whereas here in these recordings, he really comes into his own. He's probably the best I've ever heard him, if not seen him. Certainly, it's up there with like Men from Uncle, but that famous Outer Limits episode he did. And I think he's actually better on the Lovecraft recordings. The short version is that you might have heard of them, but if you have not heard the recordings themselves, they are well worth checking out. They're really excellent, and they're all on YouTube. Last vinyl recording of a Lovecraft story. Last reading, last album is 1977's The Hunter of the Dark, subtitled A Tale of Obscene Curiosity. Now, this one is very obscure. I couldn't find a recording of this on YouTube or anywhere online. I know it exists because I found it on Discogs. As I was doing research for this video. So I saw the cover of the record, but didn't hear it. What is cool is that it was read by Eric Bauersfeld, and who is this man? He's the voice of Admiral Akbar. So enter your "It's a Trap" jokes here. Admiral Akbar recorded an album of Lovecraft tales. I'm not sure which one he recorded, but yeah, now I definitely have to find that album. Quick parentheses, quick side note about music. Obviously, this is a whole other realm. We're talking about story adaptations, movies, even comic books today. Usually I don't even mention comic books or records. But I'll mention two music albums. The first is 1967's The White Ship. And the band is called H.P. Lovecraft. So there was a 1960s psychedelic band. They sound kind of like the Syd Barrett era of Pink Floyd, that sort of thing. And they had, from what I could find, they had one song on that album called, which was a Lovecraft adaptation in name, at least. That was at least the name of the song was based on a Lovecraft story. It was The White Ship. The other stuff I don't think has anything to do with Lovecraft, and even that song, I think they only took the title. Obviously, Mr. Lovecraft himself was not a psychedelic musician, so the link is pretty far-fetched. But if you're looking for the first ever music composition, like pop music incursion into Lovecraft adaptations, it is this 1967's The White Ship, a song recorded by a band called H.P. Lovecraft. But then the other song I'll mention, none other than the legendary Black Sabbath. From 1970, they recorded Behind the Wall of Sleep. I think that's actually on the first album. I love Black Sabbath. I'm sure a lot of you do as well. And yeah, that's as far as I could tell. The first real song adaptation, like the first song that is actually based on a Lovecraft song. Certainly the first heavy metal song based on a Lovecraft story. In later years, Lovecraft would become almost co-synonym with heavy metal. Metallica did a lot of, plenty, at least two or three, like Call of Cthulhu, Thing That Should Not Be. There were quite a few like that. Plenty of heavy metal bands either recorded songs based on Lovecraft or put jokes about Lovecraft on the covers, like Iron Maiden did. But the first heavy metal song based on a Lovecraft story is by the first heavy metal band on the first heavy metal record. it's Behind the Wall of Sleep, and it's super cool and it rules. Before I move on to our last entry for this video, if you want to hear If you want to hear a record by a band that sounds like they're Cthulhu cultists, that band is called Comus. They're like death metal, except it's folk music. And I forget what the name of the album is, but I'll put the cover here in the video. But it's really supremely creepy, but it's so good, that album. Like one of the best albums I've ever heard. And there's nothing on earth like Comus's first album. They did a second one. Apparently, it doesn't sound like that. Most of the members had gone by then. Yeah. So if you've never heard of it, and if you want to know the true sound of madness in a catchy pop song like folk song, Comus, yeah, it rules. Okay, Comus rules. Now, our last entry for today, our last adaptation, and the first ever H.P. Lovecraft adaptation across all media I could find. If you know of an earlier one, do let me know. But as far as I could find, the first time a Lovecraft story was adapted was in 1945. It was a radio show. The show was called Suspense, the weekly show, and the episode was The Dunwich Horror. This lasts about 26 minutes. You can find it online. It stars Ronald Coleman and Brett Morrison and a few other people. People who were actors who were well renowned in the 1940s, but I don't know them. What I do know is that I listened to this like a few days ago for the first time. I'd heard of it, but I hadn't listened to it. And this is, I won't swear, but it is effing awesome. Okay? The Dunwich Horror, the 1945 adaptation, is truly amazing. Okay, so what it is essentially, it's you've probably heard of Orson Welles' War of the Worlds, which was done as a real live radio broadcast. So they don't do the entire story like that, but it starts like that. So we have the first few minutes of this radio broadcast of the Dunwich Horror, which is told as if it was a news interview between the person who's animating the radio show and like the anchor, if you like, and the field reporter who's in Dunwich, Massachusetts. They pronounce it Dunwich, and they're, oh yeah, this horrible event that went here, and I think I have a witness here, and what did you think, ma'am? And you know, a big part of the Dunwich Horror story involves the birds, the whippoorwills. I forget the name, like, but the sound of birds are involved quite massively in the story, and I had no idea what they sounded like, and now I do, because you hear them obviously. And it's okay, so it's a true gift from life itself that we have such a wonderful audio adaptation of a Lovecraft story. When I was a kid, I had a recording of Christopher Lee doing Edgar Allan Poe stories. He did Hop Frog and I think Telltale Heart and another. And this is as good as that, essentially. The actors are great. Obviously, they've condensed the story, but it's very faithful. They change a little bit the ending, which just a little bit. But and I obviously think the original one is better. But it's still very, very close, and I would say true to the spirit of the story. The guy playing Armitage is great. The guy playing Wilbur Whateley, he's fantastic. You really hear the character that Lovecraft wrote. And we're truly blessed in that, you know, I mentioned that the first movie adaptation, like the first real official adaptation is, even though it's called an Edgar Allan Poe adaptation, is The Haunted Palace. I mean, they just changed the name because the producers changed the name, but it's definitely a Lovecraft story. And there's obviously the Mexican movie La Marca del Muerto, which I mentioned. It's a true adaptation, but it's not a true adaptation. Like the first real adaptation we have is The Haunted Palace, and we're truly blessed, as I mentioned, because it's such a great movie, visually luscious, with fantastic actor and a great soundtrack, and everything about Haunted Palace is great. And we are doubly blessed because the first ever Lovecraft adaptation, all media included, is just as good as that, really, in radio form. And it's a version of a Lovecraft story told at least partly as a real life news broadcast, you know, like in Orson Welles' War of the Worlds. And I did not expect that at all. And it works super well. And I was a little bit disappointed because it didn't do that the whole length of the story, which it probably would have been too difficult. But once it becomes a more traditional tale with actors, you know, playing the roles and so forth, it's really good. That's all I have to say. And I love it. I think you will love it too if you haven't heard it yet. Again, it's on YouTube. It's definitely worth checking out. And that's it. That was our panorama of all known adaptations of Lovecraft across all media, all media basically, except feature films before 1980. If you know anything about puppet shows, like if you know of some media I forgot, Edison Rolls or something like that, let me know in the comments and I'll mention it eventually. If you want to support what I do, thanks. I have a Patreon and also a Substack. Right now, mostly the Patreon, which I've just started. And my goal in life is to help people and to cure the world with, you know, music and philosophy and the love of geeky cool stuff. So that's what I do. So if that sounds good to you, you know, you want to support me and what I do, you're the best. You're great. I love you. And if you don't, and if you can't, I love you too. So it's all good. Next time, taking a break from Lovecraft, I will either do a take on Cronenberg's Crash, which was recommended in the comments. That one is we'll be talking about philosophy and Baudrillard and Heidegger and stuff like that. And so that's coming, and also a very fun Italian jazz knockoff called Tentacles with a mutated squid. So I'll probably do a video on that very soon. Depends how many Heidegger articles I need to read to do the Crash thing. So yeah, so that's what's in the pipeline for now. But for today, that's it. Take care. Keep watching the skies. Life is good. Live long and prosper. Take care. See you soon.